For the opera The Battle of Kulikovo, see Dmitry Donskoy. The Battle of Kulikovo was fought between the armies of the Golden Horde under the command of Mamay, and various Russian principalities under the united command of Prince Dmitry of Moscow. The battle took place on the 8th of September 1380, at the Kulikovo field near the Don River, and was won by Dmitry, who became known as Donskoy after the battle. Although the victory did not end the Mongol domination over Russia, it is widely regarded by Russian historians as the turning point when Mongol influence began to wane and Muscovite power to rise. This process eventually led to Muscovite independence and formation of the modern Russian state. According to the Russian historian Lev Gumilev, Russians went to the Kulikovo field as citizens of various principalities and returned as a united Russian nation. Background: after the Mongol-Tatar conquest, the territories of the disintegrating Kievan Rus became part of the western region of the Mongol Empire, centered in the lower Volga region. The numerous Russian principalities became the Horde's tributaries. During this period, the small regional principality of Moscow was growing in power and was often challenging its neighbors over territory, including clashing with the Grand Duchy of Ryazan. The intrigues between Moscow and Ryazan predate the Mongol-Tatar conquest, having arisen during the ascent of regional powers within the Kievan Rus. A civil war had arisen in the falling Golden Horde, and new political powers were appearing, such as the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Grand Duchy of Moscow, and the Grand Duchy of Ryazan. After the mysterious death of Khan Abdullah the Tartar in 1370, warlord Mamay took control of the Golden Horde and was appointed regent for the immature Khan Muhammad Bolak. Mamay was not a Genghisid, and as such his grip on power was tenuous, as there were blood descendants of Genghis Khan with potential claims to the rulership of the Horde. Meanwhile, the expansion of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was gaining momentum, the duchy having taken over some former territories of the Golden Horde and, after the Battle of Blue Waters, having secured power over both Kiev and parts of the northern Black Sea coast. In 1362, the Prince of Moscow, Dmitry Donskoy, came into physical possession of the Grand Duchy of Vladimir. He sought a jarlik from Mamay granting him formal possession of the duchy. Instead, in 1371, Mamay passed its title to the Prince of Tver. Prince Dmitry refused to accept Mamay's decision. Conflict ensued in 1377, when a friend of Mamay, Arpash, defeated the united armies of Suzdal and Moscow, led by Prince Dmitry, at the Battle of Pyarna River. The victors then began to raid Nizhny Novgorod and Ryazan. After the victory, Mamay sought to reaffirm his control over the tributary lands of the Golden Horde. In 1378, he sent forces led by the warlord Mirza Bagich to ensure Prince Dmitry's obedience. The Horde's army was defeated at the Battle of the Vora River and Mirza Bagich was killed. Meanwhile, another Khan, Toktamish, arose in Middle Asia to challenge Mamay from the throne of the Golden Horde. Although initially unsuccessful, Khan Toktamish slowly began to solid support for his challenge to the rulership of the Horde. In 1380, against this backdrop, Mamay chose to personally lead the Horde's forces against the forces of Moscow. In preparation for the invasion, he negotiated with both Prince Jogaila of Lithuania and a Russian Prince Oleg II of Ryazan, who struggled against Dmitry. The armies of Lithuania and Ryazan marched to join the Horde's army, and Mamay camped his army on the bank of the Don River, waiting for their arrival. Prelude. Forces. While Mamay camped, Prince Dmitry mobilized his troops and allies in Kolomna to resist the invasion. The army of Moscow was joined by armies from most of other Russian principalities, including Tver, Suzdal, Rostov, Yaroslavl, Polotsk, Murom and Beluzero. Many of participants had to break the former loyalties. Army of Smolensk, formerly Jogaila's vassals, joined Dmitry, as did Jogaila's brothers Andrei of Polotsk and Dmitry of Bryansk. In spite of Oleg's alliance with Mamay, a number of Ryazan boyars defected with the servants to join Dmitry. According to Sergius of Radonez's hagiography, St. Sergius met Dmitry, blessed the Russian armies before the battle, and sent a group of warrior monks to accompany the combined force. Prince Dmitry learned of the approaching armies of Lithuania and Ryazan. On the 7th of September 1380, Prince Dmitry's forces crossed the Don to attack before his enemies could combine the forces. Combined Russian armies under the command of the Grand Prince of Vladimir, Dmitry Ivanovich of Moscow, faced a much larger Tatar force under the command of Mamay, a strong man of the Golden Horde. Mamay's allies, Grand Prince Oleg II of Ryazan and Grand Prince Jogaila of Lithuania, were late to the battle. According to a theory put forward by historian Dmitry Balashov, Oleg was actually not willing to join any side at all, and probably even sent some of his aforementioned defectors to help Dmitry, while pretending that Ryazan in general remained loyal to the Horde. The old Russian poem Zadinshchina lists 150,000 Russians and 300,000 Tataro-Mongols as taking part in the battle, but the actual size of the Kulikovo field would not allow such a number of troops. The figures were more likely closer to 60,000 Russians, including 7,000 rebel Lithuanians and 125,000 Tatars. Mamay's army also included an unknown number of mercenaries he hired in the Republic of Genoa fortress Kaffa. Location: ancient sources do not give a precise description of the site of the battle. As a result, until the 19th century the precise location of the battle was unknown until Stepan Nechayev came up with what he believed was the exact location of the battle, and his hypothesis was accepted. Battle. On September 7, Donskoy was told that Mamay's army is approaching. He passes the river at the Don's intersection with Nepridava and chooses a position on the fields of Kulikovo. The Grand Prince arranged his army in multiple lines. The first line was made up of elite troops. In the second line, the Russian center was made up of a larger force surrounded by troops that made up the left and right wings. Behind them waited the reserves. The army's flanks were covered by dense forests which destroyed any hope the Horde might have had for a surprise flank attack. Under the command of Vladimir Andreevich Serpuhovsky and Bobrok, the Russians hid another part of their army. Mamay placed his entire army on a single line. On the morning of September 8, a thick fog covered the fields of Kulikovo, preventing battle from being joined. The fog cleared around 11 a.m., and both armies began to advance. The battle opened with single combat between two champions. The Russian champion was Alexander Peresvet, a monk from the Trinity Abbey sent to the battle by St. Sergius. The Horde's champion was Temir Murza. Though each champion killed the other during the first pass of the contest, Peresvet did not fall from the saddle, while Temir Murza did. During the battle, Dmitry exchanged his armor with young Moscow boyar Mikhail Branik, in order to pretend to be an ordinary knight. Branik was instructed to imitate the prince, bearing his banner and wearing his armor. The trick was successful. The Tatars aimed the fire at Dmitry's banner and ultimately killed Branik, believing he was the prince. Dmitry himself survived, although wounded, and immediately after the battle fainted from exhaustion and loss of blood. The Russian vanguard routed after holding the Horde for some time, after which the Horde advanced towards the following lines of units. After approximately 3 hours of battle, the Russian forces were successful, despite great casualties, in holding off the Horde's attack. The cavalry of Vladimir, Prince of Serpukhov, led by Prince Bobrok, launched a surprise counter-strike on the Horde's flank, which led to the collapse of the Horde's line. After the Horde was routed, the Russians chased the Tatars for over 50 kilometers, until they reached Mechir. All of the Khan's herds fell into the hands of Donskoy. Aftermath. Upon learning of Mamay's defeat, Prince Jogaila turned his army back to Lithuania. Prince Oleg of Ryazan was forced to accept Prince Dmitry as his sovereign and to sign a treaty of peace. Muhammad Bulek, Mamay's figurehead Khan, was killed in battle. Mamay escaped to the Genoese stronghold Kaffa in Crimea and was soon assassinated by the mercenaries whom he failed to pay. Mamay's rival, Khan Toghtamish, was left in uncontested control of the Horde. Prince Dmitry did not manage to become fully independent from the Golden Horde. However, in 1382, Khan Toghtamish launched another campaign against the Grand Duchy of Moscow. He captured and burned down Moscow, forcing Dmitry to accept him as sovereign. However, the victory at Kulikovo was an early sign of the decline of Mongol power. In the century that followed, Moscow's power rose, solidifying control over the other Russian principalities. Russian vassalage to the Golden Horde officially ended in 1480, a century after the battle. Following the defeat of the Horde at the Great Stand on the Uzhira River. Legacy. The site of the battle is commemorated by a memorial church built from a design by Alexei Shushev, a minor planet. 2869 Nepryadva, discovered in 1980 by Soviet astronomer Nikolai Stepanovich Cherny, was named in honor of the Russian victory over the Tataro-Mongols. Perspectives. The historical evaluation of the battle has many theories as to its significance in the course of history. The traditional Slavophile Russian point of view sees the battle as the first step in the liberation of the Russian lands from the Golden Horde dependency. It should however be noted that most parts of the old Kievan Rus at this time were controlled by the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Some historians within the Eastern Orthodox tradition view the battle as a standoff between the Christian Rus and non-Christians of the steppe. Russian historian Sergei Solovyov saw the battle as critical for the history of Eastern Europe in stopping another invasion from Asia, similar to the Battle of Chalons in the 5th century and the Battle of Tours in the 8th century in Western Europe. Other historians believe that the meaning of the battle is overstated, viewing it as nothing more than a simple regional conflict within the Golden Horde. Another Russian historian, Lev Gumilev, sees in Mamay representative of economic and political interests from outside, particularly Western Europe, which in the battle were represented by numerous Genoese mercenaries, while the Moscow army stood in support of the rightful ruler of the Golden Horde, Duke Tamizan. For the opera The Battle of Kulikovo, see Dmitry Donskoy. The Battle of Kulikovo was fought between the armies of the Golden Horde under the command of Mamay, and various Russian principalities under the united command of Prince Dmitry of Moscow. The battle took place on the 8th of September 1380, at the Kulikovo field near the Don River and was won by Dmitry, who became known as Donskoy after the battle. Although the victory did not end the Moltata conquest, the territories of the disintegrating Kievan Rus became part of the western region of the Mongol Empire, centered in the Lower Volga region. The numerous Russian principalities became the Horde's tributaries. During this period, the small regional principality of Moscow was growing in power and was often challenging its neighbors over territory, including clashing with the Grand Duchy of Ryazan. The intrigues between Moscow and Ryazan immature Khan Muhammad Bolak. Mamay was not a Genghisid, and as such his grip on power was tenuous, as there were blood descendants of Genghis Khan with potential claims to the rulership of the Horde. Meanwhile, the expansion of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania was gaining momentum. the duchy having taken over some former territories of the Golden Horde and, after the Battle of Blue Waters, having secured power over both Kiev and parts of the northern Mongol domination over Russia. It is widely regarded by Russian historians as the turning point when Mongol influence began to wane and Muscovite power to rise. This process eventually led to Muscovite independence and formation of the modern Russian state. According to the Russian historian Lev Gumilov, Russians went to the Kulikovo field as citizens of various principalities and returned as a united Russian nation. Background: after the Mongol predate the Mongol-Tatar conquest, having arisen during the ascent of regional powers within the Kievan Rus, a civil war had arisen in the falling Golden Horde and new political powers were appearing, such as the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, the Grand Duchy of Moscow, and the Grand Duchy of Ryazan. After the mysterious death of Khan Abdullah the Tartar in 1370, warlord Mamay took control of the Golden Horde and was appointed regent for the